Forbes has released a rather very interesting insight report that tells you exactly how much the Indiana Fever's social media engagements are actually monetarily worth, either on X or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. I mean, all these posts have a monetary value to them based on engagement.
All right, so the Indiana Fever social media just got valued at a whopping $55 million. And get this, it's not even close to second place. Forbes dropped this report, and honestly, it's got a lot of people scrambling for excuses because these numbers don't lie. While everyone was arguing about who really matters most in the WNBA, the actual data just came in and settled it in the most brutal way possible. What's crazy is this Forbes report is like a total bomb dropped on every single argument the old guard WNBA fans have been pushing for months. The Indiana Fever's social media is valued at $55.4 million. No, that's not a typo, and it's not an exaggeration. That's what happens when you draft someone who genuinely moves the needle in ways this league has simply never seen before.
If you are a Caitlin Clark fan, if you're an Indiana Fever fan, this is something you already know. However, for the haters out there, the old WNBA fandom, many of you call them the slows, for those fans, they're in complete denial. We've tried to tell people Caitlin Clark moves the needle unlike anybody else in this league or everybody else in this league. It just sort of is what it is. Fans are coming to see one particular player, and along with that, carries over the support to the entire team.
Look, before anyone starts saying this is disrespectful to other players or that we should just celebrate everyone equally, let's just remember one thing. We're talking about cold, hard numbers here. This isn't just my opinion. This isn't bias or some hot take. This is a legitimate study. It was done by STN Digital and Zoom Analytics, and they tracked over 20,000 pieces of content. They covered Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube throughout the entire season. They looked at impressions, engagements, and even what it would cost advertisers to get that same kind of exposure through paid ads. And the Fever? They just came out on top by a margin that's so massive, it's honestly kind of embarrassing for everyone else.
Posts are worth a lot of money. They are worth a lot of money, and I can tell you right now, that's a little over 5 times higher than the next WNBA team. 5 times higher. Let's go down here. Just scroll down. The Indiana Fever's staggering $55 million social media evaluation speaks volumes.
So, second place? That went to the Dallas Wings, coming in at $8.61 million. Let that sink in for a second. The gap between first and second place is over $46 million. That's not even a competitive race. Honestly, it feels like they're playing a completely different sport at this point. The Fever aren't just ahead, they're operating on a totally different level with numbers nobody else can even touch. Now, the Wings actually had an incredible year, with engagement up 505% and their social value climbing 340, and still, they got absolutely demolished by that gap. Third place went to the Las Vegas Aces at $7.64 million, which makes sense. They're the dynasty team, right? Multiple championships, tons of star power. Fourth was the New York Liberty at $7.5 million, which also tracks because they're in the biggest media market in the country. But here's where it gets really interesting. Fifth place went to the Chicago Sky at $6.35 million. Remember all those debates about who was really bringing more attention to the league? All those arguments about rookies, impact, and cultural relevance? Well, the numbers just answered that question definitively, and it wasn't close. The fact that the Sky landed in fifth, even with a player who was supposed to be equally impactful, tells you everything you need to know. The whole narrative all season was that 2 players were driving WNBA growth and bringing in new fans. But the social media value shows a $48.69 million gap between the Fever and the Sky. That's not a small difference. That's not margin of error stuff. That's a completely different stratosphere of impact and engagement.
Noticing the growing popularity of WNBA across social media, social agency STN Digital and analytics and measurement platform Zoom teamed up to quantify the league's online impact with a newly released WNBA social rankings and insight report. The research analyzes how every team performed across social media during the 2025 season and identifies which clubs and content pieces generated the most engagement, impressions, and estimated media value.
And here's what's even crazier about these numbers. The Fever didn't stop posting Caitlin Clark content even after the season ended. They just kept that engagement going, kept the content flowing, and kept giving fans reasons to interact with their social media. That's just smart business, right? When you have someone who generates that kind of interest, you don't take your foot off the gas. You keep feeding the audience what they want, and you ride that wave for as long as it lasts. The study specifically looked at content posted between May 16th and September 11th during the season, and the Fever, they racked up an incredible 38.73 million engagements and 1.117 billion impressions. Yes, that's billion with a B. To put that in perspective for you, that's actually more impressions than most professional sports teams get in an entire year across all their social platforms. And we're talking about the WNBA here, a league that has historically struggled to get mainstream attention and media coverage. Now get this, one of the most insane stats from the report is that the Fever had a single YouTube video valued at that's one video, not an entire campaign or a series. One single piece of content was worth $750,000 in equivalent advertising value. That's the kind of number that makes marketing executives lose their minds, because it just shows you how engaged and active that fan base really is. You don't get those numbers unless people are genuinely watching, sharing, commenting, and coming back for more. Seriously, think about this. That one video's value is actually higher than some WNBA team's entire social media worth for the whole season. One piece of Fever content is worth more than everything some franchises posted combined. That's not just winning. That's dominating in a way that truly changes how the entire league has to think about social media strategy and fan engagement moving forward. The methodology behind these numbers is also really important to understand. They used something called the social value metric. This basically calculates what advertisers would have to pay to get the exact same exposure through paid media. So when we say the Fever's social media is worth $55 million, it means if companies wanted to buy that same number of impressions and engagements through traditional advertising, it would literally cost them. The Fever are getting all that value organically, just by posting content their fans genuinely want to see. And this also completely destroys the argument that the WNBA's growth is evenly distributed, or that multiple players are equally responsible for this huge surge in popularity. If that were true, you'd expect to see much closer numbers across the top teams, right? Instead, you have one team that's 5 times higher than second place. That's not parity. That's one player literally dragging an entire franchise into relevance and taking the whole league along for the ride, whether people want to admit it or not. The Dallas Wings' massive year-over-year growth is definitely worth noting, though. Increasing engagement by 5, and a lot of that probably has to do with Sophie Cunningham's social media presence and personality. She's been one of the most searched WNBA players and has landed sponsorships with big brands like Arby's, because she knows how to market herself and create content people want to engage with. But even with that explosive growth, they're still nowhere near the Fever's numbers. That just tells you how far ahead Caitlin Clark's impact truly is. The fact that the Chicago Sky finished 5th is probably the most shocking revelation in this entire report for anyone who believed the narratives being pushed all season. There was constant media coverage comparing two players, suggesting they were both equally transformative for the league. But the social media value shows a gap of nearly $49 million. That's not a close competition at all. One player is just generating engagement and value at a level that nobody else in the league can even match. Some people will try to argue that the Fever just had a better social media strategy, or that their content team is superior. And sure, there's probably some truth to that. STN Digital did work with the Fever on some campaigns and content strategy, which likely helped maximize the value they were generating. But here's the thing, you can have the best social media team in the world, and if your players aren't interesting to fans, the content just won't perform. The Fever's numbers are high because fans want to see Caitlin Clark content. They want updates, highlights, behind-the-scenes footage, and anything else related to her. The demand truly drives the supply, not the other way around. This report also highlights something the WNBA has been really reluctant to fully embrace, and that's that star power genuinely matters. The league has tried to push this egalitarian message that everyone is equally important and everyone deserves equal attention. But that's just not how sports fandom works. People connect with individual players. They buy jerseys of specific athletes. They tune in to watch particular stars perform. The sooner the WNBA accepts that and builds its marketing around its biggest stars, the faster the league will actually continue to grow. The Fever's social media value is also a huge asset when it comes to attracting sponsors and negotiating partnerships. When you can show potential sponsors that your content reaches over 1 billion impressions and generates nearly 40 million engagements, you have some serious leverage in those conversations. Brands want access to engaged audiences, and the Fever have proven they can deliver that at a scale no other WNBA team can match. That translates directly into real revenue through sponsorships, advertising deals, and partnerships. It's also worth considering what this means for the Fever's future business decisions. When one player is responsible for generating this much social media value, you do whatever it takes to keep that player happy and on your roster. You build around them, you support, you make sure they have everything they need to succeed, because losing them would be absolutely catastrophic for the franchise's bottom line. The Fever aren't just thinking about wins and losses anymore. They're thinking about engagement, impressions, social value, and all those business metrics that come with having a transcendent star. The Las Vegas Aces finishing third despite being the defending champions and having multiple All-Stars shows that winning alone doesn't automatically drive social media engagement. The Aces are successful on the court, sure, but they don't generate the same level of fan interest and content engagement as teams with more marketable personalities. That's an important lesson for the entire league. Championship banners are great, but they don't automatically translate to social media value and fan engagement if people aren't emotionally invested in your players. The New York Liberty being fourth is somewhat surprising given that they're in the largest media market in the country. You'd think being in New York would provide a massive advantage for social media growth and engagement. But location only matters if you have players and content that people actually care about. The Liberty are competitive and well-run, but they don't have anyone generating Caitlin Clark levels of interest, which really limits their social media ceiling regardless of market size. What this report really proves is that the WNBA's recent growth isn't as evenly distributed as the league wants people to believe. There's one clear driver of the increased attention and engagement, and the numbers back that up in ways that simply can't be argued against. The Fever's social media value is 5 times higher than second place. Their content generates billions of impressions. Individual videos are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those aren't the numbers of a league experiencing broad-based growth. Those are the numbers of one team and one player operating at a completely different level than everyone else. For fans who have been saying this all along, this report is total vindication. For people who argued that multiple players were equally responsible for the WNBA's growth, the numbers are a harsh reality check. And for the league itself, this should be a huge wake-up call about where the attention and value are actually coming from. You can pretend everyone matters equally if you want, but the data tells a very, very different story. The Fever's success on social media also creates pressure on other teams to figure out how to better engage their audience. If one team can generate $55 million in social value while everyone else is stuck in single digits, that means there's a huge opportunity being left on the table. Other franchises need to really look at what the Fever are doing and why it works, and then find ways to create their own compelling content that truly resonates with fans. Otherwise, that gap is only going to continue to grow. This report is also serious ammunition for anyone arguing that certain players deserve higher salaries and better treatment from the league. When you can directly quantify the value someone brings to their franchise and the league through social media impact, it becomes a lot harder to justify paying them the same as players who generate just a fraction of the engagement. The WNBA's current salary structure doesn't really account for individual star power and marketing value the way other leagues do. But numbers like these make it clear that maybe the estimated media value model used in this study is exactly how major brands and corporations think about social media ROI. They look at impressions and engagements, and then calculate what that exposure would cost through paid advertising. The fact that the Fever are generating $55 million in equivalent advertising value just through organic content is absolutely incredible from a business perspective. That's basically free marketing that would cost tens of millions to replicate through traditional advertising channel. The numbers are truly in, and they're not up for debate anymore. Caitlin Clark isn't just moving the needle for the Indiana Fever. She's operating in a completely different universe than everyone else in terms of social media value and fan engagement.